101.5 on your dial, also streamed live at Radio KTAL, QUETAL.org. We have a guest today calling in from Chico, California, Jim Pushnik, a professor at Cal State University, Chico. So, Jim, can you hear us? It is, and we actually got the phones working. That's the first time we've tried it on this show. For your listeners, this is Science. Let's take a look. I'm your host, Vince Guchik, and also with me in the studio today is John Nelson, a real engineer, and I guess you're now an audio engineer, John. There's your mic. Okay, so the idea of the program today is to find out what you've been doing there at Cal State Chico for sustainability programs. And there's a whole lot of topics we could go into, one of which is from the start, what does science say about sustainability? And I shared with Jim a write-up that I've been working on, year and a half. And I had two segments to it. One of them is the view from outside the Earth. So what people look at when they're looking at exoplanets in other stellar systems. And there's so many things. People say, okay, is the star bright enough? Is the planet at the right distance so that it has the right temperature? And there are so many different parts of that. Let me grab a little list. Okay, so getting the temperature right, first part. And everybody agrees that's an absolute necessity. But there's much more than that. This temperature has to be right not only on average, but for the whole day of that planet, the whole season. You can't have a planet in a really elliptical orbit where it comes close and far and goes far. And so you freeze and bake. The planet has to rotate fast enough so the same thing doesn't happen on a daily basis. You have to have the right chemistry.
Oh, shit.
What?
Bam. Real
What?
loud.
What? Yours is off?
Real loud.
What? Yours is? Which is loud? Mine is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been looking. Anyway, we'll keep going. John, you can adjust the volume over there on yours. It's the second dial. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of, as I said, chemical constraints. You have to have carbon for life, and it's really easy to argue that nothing else will work. No other element bonds to itself and to so many other elements. And the elements have to stay available on the surface of the Earth. They have to recycle. You have to have water. There are other solvents like ammonia that don't work at the right temperature, or if you got them to the right temperature, you'd have a runaway greenhouse effect. You'd have to have tectonic activity as part of the recycling. And so the planet has to be big enough and not cool too fast, not cool too slow, and we can go on. The second part of the view is that we have to keep our ecological support system going. And that's the place where we can mess up. We can't do much about the planet, where we are, how bright our sun is, and so on. But we can change the atmosphere, as we have been doing, aerosols, greenhouse gases, and so on. We can eliminate a lot of species that support us with ecosystem services, you name it, pollination, insect control, disease control.
Ask if your speaker can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me, right, Jim? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, he's fine. Okay, so Jim, let you take the ball from here because you have an amazing program out there. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then what the program is and how it started. So that's the next 3 hours, right?
I thought it had to be on here.
I am currently the director of the Institute for Sustainable Development at Cal State Chico. In that role, my job description really is to oversee our campus efforts and in both curriculum and operations to try to achieve climate neutrality and social equity by 2030. And so this institute is situated in a unique spot in academia. I am housed in academic affairs, which is the educational side of the house. I'm not affiliated with any college in particular. So I have a space where faculty can come and work together in an interdisciplinary way. And I've also been able to make collaborations with our operations people, the engineers, the janitorial service, and we all work together to try to make our campus as a model for to be used for sustainable development in communities around us. We use the campus as this sort of microcosm of things that could be implemented to make the quality of life better. I came into this role, as Vince is aware, I'm a biologist by training, and my focus has been on how plants and animals use the limited resources that we have to build sustainable ecosystems, things that have lasted for thousands of years. And that has really shaped the way I have viewed things. When I came to Cal State Chico from NMSU, I was very fortunate. I had been interested in a long time in air quality, air pollution, and I was able to link up with Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and we started looking at the photosynthesis and the impacts of acid rain along and ozone along our transportation corridors, as well as the increase in CO2.
Oh,
and
that was, sorry. I
Go
remember ahead. You were working with the fellow, Jim somebody, or?
Yeah, Dr. James Hoopus.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, that goes back how long now?
Oh, man, that was 1990.
Right.
When we set up a fairly detailed set of regimes that different CO2 levels, and we looked at genotypes of pine species all across California. We had some 200 different species, or not species, but gene lines of ponderosa pine, and looked at how they would begin to adapt to these altered conditions. And in reality, that really set my mind going in that I started to try to communicate that we were seeing dramatic changes in the capacity of these conifers to live where they did. They actually looked like they were stampeding up the hill, trying to find a habitable climate. When I first realized that, I started to go around and do public talks. And those public talks were, with groups like business people, business luncheons, Serotomists, our Granges, those kind of public venues where people not necessarily were interested in climate change or sustainability in any way.
So what made you go to them? I presume you invited yourself. That was your initiative?
To get to those places?
Right.
No, actually, there was a program going, and we have a fairly notable climate skeptic that lives in this community, Anthony Watt. And he was reaching out to these people, and they contacted me to have a contrasting view.
Oh, good.
And so it was actually, and I still have an interesting running dialogue with Anthony Watt on on climate. The upshot of all that was that I was given an endowed professorship in environmental literacy by a local businessman who has just recently passed away, Mr. Jack Rawlins.
So that was on the basis of these presentations you made? Is that how he grabbed you for that professorship?
Yes.
great.
Yes. And so, I guess the bottom line of all that is that he realized, as a scientist, I was talking to other scientists, and I needed to get the information out in a way that people that were not, I'm not going to say not scientifically literate, but we're not using the same words. All right. So.
Could I break in for a second?
Absolutely.
An interesting story. I had a grant from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and I visited my program director, and he told me once that he convened a meeting of climate modelers and, was it meteorologists? And it took a half day for them to realize they were talking about the same thing with different words. It was a model for one group, it was a parameterization for the other. And that's between closely allied sciences.
That's exactly right. And so, once I realized that we weren't communicating, and that's why I had become incredibly frustrated that we all know from the sciences that there's irrefutable evidence that we are altering the planet in many ways.
Right.
And to translate this across to people with other worldviews was an issue I tried to deal with. So this endowment allowed me to do a couple of things. Jack was emphatic that I create a program where every student that enters through our university at least completes one course that goes over the principles of sustainability that include not only environmental, but the social and the economic parameters of that. So that was my first challenge.
Yeah, so he's a visionary, and you were the one to take up the vision, and I think that worked out excellently.
Yeah. And so I created a class that was called Environmental Literacy, which covered all those, and it was the first attempt at that. So I was, after a couple of tries at it, I was able to convince the then Dean of Natural Sciences that this was a critical course for all students training in the sciences, because we know in the disciplinary perspectives, excuse me, that we don't get that broad view other than in our general education program. So I had all biologists, all environmental scientists, all the geologists, nursing students, those kind of students that were matriculating through our program took this course. And it became so popular because what I did, I wanted to have different disciplinary perspectives come in. So I'd invite an economist to come in and give their view on sustainability. When we would be I'd introduce economics and the models of economics and have an economist come in and talk about their view.
So this is within the academic departments like economics?
Yes.
Okay.
From all across campus. And here's the funny part was, at one point in time, because I'd have somebody coming in to talk, say an engineer coming in to talk, and an economist would come in the next week, the economist would want to come hear what the engineer had to say so that they could. And honestly, at one point, I had as many faculty in the room as I did students.
Oh, fantastic.
They came, and it created this cohort of people that were interested, and it started a dialogue that we ultimately then, during one of our accreditation efforts, we began to talk about redesigning general education so that we had a pathway where students could cycle through their general education and see different perspectives, different disciplinary views on the subject of sustainability.
Oh, let me break in for a second. It's about time for a station break, so we'll be off for a minute and a half, and then we'll come back. Meanwhile, we'll This is KTAL LP FM in Las Cruces, New Mexico, 101.5, and I'll have more to say what KTAL is all about pretty soon.